Hey guys, Diesel Will here. So today we're going to talk about the coolant system. I'm going to show you guys basically the main points on a coolant system. Alright, so let's get started. So first thing, we have the radiator. This right here is the front of the radiator. You want to make sure that none of these are dented in. If you spray your truck off or whatever, you want to make sure that you don't power wash it, because these little guys right here, the power of the hose can actually cause these to bend in on each other, and if it's bending in, then air's not going through the venting system here. And what happens is when you're going down the road, air gets pushed through here, through these vents, and that air goes in and it cools the coolant that's inside the radiator. This right here is the intercooler housing unit. You got your fan back here. So basically what it does is as the air comes in, you have coolant that's in here. This coolant's hot. The air cools the coolant down. The coolant is then recirculated back into the engine. And what the coolant does is it cools all the parts down, so that the engine doesn't overheat and you don't end up breaking something, such as slinging a rod, detonating a piston, things like that. And what'll happen is there is a thermostat in there, and the thermostat, its job is to open and close. Basically, it tells you, it'll let you know, like, if the motor's getting too hot, the thermostat will open up, and what it'll do is it'll shoot coolant in there, and it'll let the coolant cool the engine down. If the engine's too cold, it'll close off and it'll let the engine warm up, because the engine has to be at a certain temperature when it's running. And the fan right here, this specific fan, what happens with this is this kicks on. There's an electronical switch that actually controls the fan. Usually inside the cab there's a fan override button that you can actually push and actually turn the fan on if you need it to. Like if you see like the temperature's getting too hot on there, you could try turning the defroster all the way on, putting the heat on all the way full blast. That should lower the temperature in the engine. What that's doing then is you're basically using the heater coil as a radiator. At that point, you're trying to cool the engine down to a little bit, just so you can get where you're going to go, hopefully to the nearest truck stop. Hopefully you're not too far away. And it's going to burn you out. You're going to be like extremely hot. But what'll also happen is you can control this fan right here. This is based off of an electrical switch. So what happens is it sends a signal to the ECM and tells the ECM, hey, the motor's getting hot, we need you to turn the fan on. So the fan comes on, and what it does is it cools inside these little, like I said, inside these vents, it cools the coolant off that's in here. This right here is the intercooler, and hoses connect in here, and they run back into the engine. So basically coolant flows through the engine, goes through all the parts, cools all the parts down, and by the time it comes back on the other side, and I'll show you guys, is the coolant will come back out of here and run right back into here. So this coolant that's coming out, this is extremely hot, and it's going right back in, and it goes into the intercooler, which again, the radiator, these little vents right here, they cool the coolant off, and then it comes back and it just recycles, and it's just a complete cycle that just completely continues to circle around, and that's what keeps your motor cool, along with oil too as well for lubricant. Now these fans, there's different types of fans. You have some that are pressure sensitive, like if the engine gets up to, or temperature controlled. So if the engine gets to a certain temperature, it kicks on. You have some that are air controlled. So if it gets up to a certain PSI or whatever, it'll kick the fan on. I haven't seen a hydraulic fan I'm sure somebody somewhere is trying to make one, but pretty much, you know, these are controlled by a switch. And like I said, there's an in-cab, you know, fan override usually in the cab, and you can kick that on, you know, to give it the opportunity to cool off a little more. But that's pretty much it. I mean, it's not too bad. You know, it cools that engine down, so that's the main thing that you want. So, well, I appreciate it, guys. I hope you learned something today, and peace out.